The sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway of ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America. Agent Mark Reynolds held his breath as the metal doors clanked shut behind him, one after another. In his hand was a small black folder stamped in bold red letters. Classified, eyes only. The deeper he went, the colder it became, as if the air itself didn't want to move here. Every step he took brought him closer to a truth that had been buried for years, something that could destroy more than just careers. When Mark reached cell 13, the guard beside him stopped. "You sure you want to do this, Agent?" the man asked, his voice shaking slightly. "We don't open that cell unless it's an emergency." Mark didn't answer. He just looked through the thick glass window. Inside, sitting perfectly still in the DAC, was Leonard Hale, the inmate the government pretended no longer existed. Officially, he'd been transferred years ago. But Mark now knew that wasn't true. Leonard Hale was alive, and what he knew could unravel the entire justice system. Leonard looked up slowly, a faint smile curling across his face. "They finally sent someone brave enough to open the files," he said quietly. Mark's heart pounded. "You shouldn't know about that," he replied. "Oh, Agent Reynolds," Leonard whispered. "I know everything that happens in this place. You just don't understand yet." The lights above flickered, and a low alarm sounded somewhere in the distance. Then, complete darkness. And in that moment, Mark realized the classified files on ADX Florence weren't just paper. They were alive. Cliffhanger. It all began 6 months earlier. Before the folder. Before the secrets. Before Agent Mark Reynolds had ever stepped foot inside ADX Florence. Mark had been a quiet investigator with the Department of Justice, known for digging too deep into old cases. He'd built a reputation for finding the things other people missed, or didn't want found. One night, while reviewing federal transfer documents, he noticed something strange, a list of inmates who had supposedly died in custody, but their death certificates were missing. One name stood out, Leonard Hale, a brilliant former engineer-turned-bomber, responsible for one of the deadliest attacks in Colorado history. He was sentenced to life without parole in ADX Florence. Official records said he died 10 years ago from heart failure. But the more Mark searched, the less sense it made. There was no body, no autopsy, and no evidence that anyone had ever seen his remains. The next morning, Mark visited his supervisor, Agent Lewis. "Sir, I think there's something wrong with the ADX Florence records," he said. "One of the inmates listed as deceased might not actually be dead." Lewis frowned. "Reynolds, you're walking into classified territory. ADX Florence isn't just another prison, it's the government's vault. Some things are sealed for a reason." But Mark couldn't let it go. He filed a quiet internal request for access to the prison's classified files. A week later, a plain envelope arrived on his desk. Inside was a short message typed in all caps, "Stop asking questions. For your own good." That only made him dig deeper. Days turned into nights as Mark pieced together clues, power outages, unauthorized deliveries, and camera footage that cut off at random hours. Each thread pointed back to the same location, the underground wing of ADX Florence, a level even most guards didn't know existed. Finally, after weeks of silence, his access request was approved, not by his supervisor, but by someone higher. The authorization came directly from the Office of Federal Security, a branch he'd never even heard of. When he arrived at the prison for the first time, he could feel the unease in the air. The guards were unusually quiet. Their eyes darted toward the cameras, then back at him. As he walked down the endless concrete corridor, one of the older guards leaned in and whispered, "If they told you to come here, you must have found something they wanted buried. Watch your back." Inside the warden's office, a thin man with gray hair greeted him without smiling. "Agent Reynolds," the warden said, "you'll be escorted through the secured levels. But understand something, whatever you see here stays here. You don't write it down. You don't record it. You don't speak of it again." Mark nodded, though his stomach was in knots. As he toured the upper levels, he noticed the cells, small, silent, and spotless. The prisoners were barely visible through their steel doors. But when he reached the restricted sector labeled Omega Block, the guards suddenly stopped walking. "This is as far as we go," one said. "You're on your own from here." Mark hesitated. "Why?" The guard looked at him, pale-faced. "Because no one who works that block sleeps well afterward." As he stepped into Omega Block, he felt it immediately, the hum of hidden machines, the faint echo of whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Cameras followed every move he made. Then, in the corner of his eye, he saw something strange, a figure standing still in one of the dark cells, watching him. He took a step closer. The nameplate was scratched, but he could just make out the letters, L. Hale. Mark froze. The man's eyes opened, sharp, cold, aware. That was the moment Mark knew the files weren't lying. Leonard Hale was alive. And ADX Florence was hiding more than prisoners. It was hiding experiments, secrets, and crimes the government couldn't afford the public to know. He took out his small recorder, whispering to himself, "This isn't just a prison, it's a cover." Suddenly, a voice came through the intercom. "Agent Reynolds. Step away from cell 13 immediately." Mark's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't the warden's. It was a voice he didn't recognize, calm, robotic, almost rehearsed. "How do you know my name?" he asked. "Because," the voice said, "you're already in the file." At that exact moment, all the lights in the block flickered out, one by one. Then came the sound of metal bolts unlocking. And Mark realized with horror, someone was opening Leonard Hale's cell. The sound of the lock echoed like thunder through the concrete hall. Agent Mark Reynolds stood frozen as the door to cell 13 creaked open, the steel groaning like it hadn't been moved in years. Cold air poured out, carrying with it a strange, metallic smell, like rust and fear. Leonard Hale stepped forward, his face half hidden by the dim light. He wasn't the frail, broken man the reports had described. He was calm, focused. His eyes locked on Mark with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here, Agent," Leonard said softly. "They sent you to close a file, didn't they? Not to find the truth." Mark reached for his radio. "Security, this is Agent Reynolds. I need backup in Omega Block." Only static answered. Leonard smiled faintly. "No one's coming. They cut the lines the moment you entered this wing." Mark backed away slowly. "You can't be out of your cell. This area is restricted. You're under." Leonard interrupted him. "Under what?" "Control. Observation. You think this place holds me." He took another slow step forward. "You have no idea what ADX Florence really is." Before Mark could react, Leonard held out his wrists, and Mark saw something shocking. The handcuffs weren't metal. They were embedded into the skin itself, like they'd been fused with his body. His veins glowed faintly beneath the surface, pulsing blue. What did they do to you?" Mark whispered. Leonard tilted his head. "Not to me, Agent. With me. Asterisk." Suddenly, alarms blared across the prison. Red lights flashed through the corridor. A robotic voice rang out from the intercom. Code black. Containment breach in Omega Block. All units to lockdown positions. Mark's instincts kicked in. He ran toward the exit, but as he reached for the steel door, it slammed shut automatically. "Locked." Leonard's voice echoed behind him. "You can't escape, Mark. None of us can. This whole place is a machine, and it doesn't run on guards or prisoners. It runs on secrets." Mark turned, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "What are you talking about? What machine?" Leonard stepped closer. "Every inmate in this prison is part of something bigger. Experiments, mind control, surveillance projects that never made it to the public. They built this place to hide what went wrong. But I learned how to use it." Mark frowned. "Use it? How?" Leonard pointed upward. "The walls, Agent. The walls listen. Watch." Suddenly, the lights above flickered again, and one of the cameras turned on its own, moving without control. Then another, and another. All the cameras in the corridor shifted until they were aimed directly at Mark. Leonard smiled. "Now it sees you." Mark's heart pounded. He tried his radio again. "Central Control, do you read? We've got a breach." But this time, a voice answered, not from the radio, but from the intercom above. "Agent Reynolds, return to your post," it said calmly. "You were never here." Mark looked up in disbelief. "Who is this?" "Security Protocol Alpha 13, the voice replied. "You are violating clearance levels." Leonard laughed, low and cold. "You see, they are already rewriting your access logs. By morning, your badge will show you never entered this block. And if you push further," he leaned close, "you'll vanish, just like the others." "What others?" Mark demanded. Leonard's expression darkened. "The agents before you. The ones who tried to expose this place. The ones who thought the files were just paperwork." Suddenly, a loud crash came from above. The ceiling vents burst open, and white gas began to spill into the hall. Mark coughed, stumbling backward. Leonard grabbed his wrist. "If you want to live, follow me." Mark hesitated, but the gas was thickening fast. He had no choice. Leonard led him toward a hidden panel at the end of the hall. Behind it, a narrow staircase spiraled downward into darkness. Where does this lead? Mark coughed. To the truth, Leonard said. To the part of ADX Florence that doesn't exist on any map. They descended into the shadows, the air growing colder with every step. The noise from above faded, replaced by the hum of machines buried deep underground. Finally, they reached a steel door marked only with a number, sublevel 9. Leonard placed his palm on the scanner beside it. The door hissed open. Inside was something Mark could barely process, rows of metal pods, each containing a prisoner suspended in a strange liquid, tubes running from their bodies into the walls. Mark stepped closer, horrified. What is this? Leonard spoke quietly. These are the ones who never made it to trial. They were erased from the system, kept alive as test subjects for something the government called Project Oblivion. It's how they learned to control behavior through sensory isolation. I was the first. Mark turned toward him, his voice trembling. And you escaped that. How? Leonard's eyes glimmered. By learning how to listen to the silence. Before Mark could ask more, a red light began flashing above them. Unauthorized access detected. A robotic voice blared. Seal sublevel 9. Lethal containment authorized. Leonard's eyes widened. They found us. A series of loud clicks echoed through the tunnel, gun turrets descending from the ceiling. Run! Leonard shouted. Mark sprinted toward the far end of the room as bullets ripped through the air, sparks flying off the steel walls. Leonard moved with surprising speed, ducking behind one of the pods. Mark reached a control panel and slammed his hand against it. A door slid open, revealing another hallway. This way, he yelled. Leonard looked back at the pods, the prisoners still trapped inside, faces frozen in terror. They'll die if we leave them. There's no time. Mark shouted. Leonard hesitated, torn. Then, as the turrets reloaded, he sprinted toward the exit, but not before grabbing a small hard drive from a console. The two men dove through the doorway just as the blast doors sealed behind them. The echo of gunfire stopped. Silence. Mark leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. What's on that drive? He asked. Leonard looked at him, a strange calm in his eyes. Proof. Everything they've done here. Every experiment, every cover-up, every prisoner who was supposed to disappear. This is the real ADX Florence. Mark's voice trembled. We have to get this out. Leonard's faint smile returned. That's the problem, Agent Reynolds. You don't get out of ADX Florence. Suddenly, the floor beneath them rumbled. A deep mechanical sound filled the hallway, as if the entire prison was awakening. Leonard looked up. They've activated the purge. The what? Mark shouted. The protocol they use when someone gets too close to the truth. The walls began to shift, metal plates sliding into place, sealing every exit. The lights flickered, then went red. Leonard turned to Mark and said calmly, If you want to live, you'll have to do exactly what I say. Mark stared at him. Why should I trust you? Leonard took a deep breath. Because I built this place.